What should the public expect from this film?
I think they need to expect, if they go to the movie, which is fine, just like, oh, I'm going to see Batman fight Superman. That's a great way to go to the movie because the movie's a lot more than Batman fighting Superman. And so I think that you're going to get that, of course, but you're going to get more, I hope.
So with Aquaman just around the corner and Wonder Woman 2 finishing up production, there is this weird sense of either dragging out a failing franchise or trying to salvage what we have with what works. So I decided to take a look back before the DC cinematic universe started dividing audiences, before Batman met Superman. Coming off of Man of Steel, I thought it was pretty okay. Definitely interested in the direction it might have headed in. But then 1 month later, the boy himself, Zack Snyder, makes an announcement at the 2013 San Diego Comic-Con regarding the Man of Steel sequel, which had only been out for a month at this point, and it was a great announcement. Like the actual announcement, not this nonsensical rambling setup.
Now that's like, right? You love movies, so like you want to go and see the movie, but I can say that maybe there's a single element that's in the film, that will be in the film, that we could, I don't know, that I could. So I was thinking about how to do that, like how could I do that? And I sort of poured through the DC universe to look for a way to tell this thing. Because of course we're writing the thing now, so it doesn't exist, but there is a thing that I found that kind of helped me.
They got Henry Lennox in to read a famous monologue from the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns graphic novel, let the audience realize what it's from, and then perfectly reveal the iconic logos.
I want you to remember the one man who beat you.
Whoa. What? What? What?
Wow, how could you not be excited by this? What a perfect reveal. Well, without this.
He's gonna read you a little thing. He's gonna read a little thing, and it's not, we're not adapting this thing, but it is the thing that will help tell that story.
Now, only being a year out from the first massive teaming up of iconic superheroes, and now Batman and Superman will be in the same movie together. A movie that we weren't going to see for another 3 years. And this is where all the early indications of problems come into play. Man of Steel has barely sunk in yet, and we are only a year after the success of Avengers. And the only reason the Avengers was successful was because of the build-up. Where a Batman and Superman movie as a sequel to Man of Steel, as exciting as an announcement as that is, who's the Batman? Not only were we a year out from the Avengers smash hit, we were also a year out from the last Batman movie. We are now finishing up the Dark Knight universe and migrating to Marvel. In retrospect, announcing something as culturally important as the first on-screen team-up between Batman and Superman is pretty huge. And the question is, should it have been so soon? And I don't think so. But didn't know that at the time, because my initial reaction was a Superman and Batman crossover before Justice League? Perfect. If Marvel did that, no one would care. Like Iron Man and Captain America before the Avengers? Yeah. Hulk and Thor before the Avengers? Nah. Hawkeye and Black Widow? No one would give a shit. But Batman and Superman, light and dark, the two biggest superhero icons that predate Spider-Man. How could it go wrong?
They need to fight each other. And then once you say it and sort of put it out, you can't take it back. Because there's no other... Like, okay, no, you know who's cooler than Batman? There's nobody.
One of the frustrating things about this movie is that it was on the right track in so many aspects, and on its own could have aped the success of Avengers. But Zack Snyder. In this video I'll be exploring how this movie set itself up for failure, but also give my own reworked movie structure based on what I was expecting from this movie, as well as some interesting fan theories on the internet that came out before the film. Also, in preparation before this discussion video, I figured I should familiarize myself with Batman vs Superman, seeing as I haven't seen it since the cinema. And what better than the ultimate cut? Since so many people are fighting for the Snyder cut of Justice League, why not watch his full vision of Batman vs Superman? All 3 fucking hours of it. My god, that is too long. And this movie can't even retain an hour and a half, let alone half a school day. So when I saw BVS back in the day, my first initial reaction is that it was dumb, rushed, and learnt no lesson from the destruction porn of Man of Steel. Now, after sitting through 3 hours of the full vision of Zack Snyder, I only have 2 words to sum up this movie: bloated and pretentious. This movie is crammed with so much junk and filler that is so far away from the point of this movie, and it isn't interesting at all. The first 30 minutes is very problematic. The movie is meant to be Batman ving Superman, but this is what happens in the first 30 minutes. Music video style opening credit montage of Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot, with the full Frank Miller imagery. This is now the 3rd time we have seen the death of Bruce Wayne's parents on the big screen, and it's also the longest. Flashback to the ending of Man of Steel, the destruction of Metropolis from Bruce Wayne's perspective. This gets a point for being on the right path. Great scene. For a movie called Batman vs Superman, this is a good setup. Should have been the very first scene in the movie. And then some random meeting between Lois and Coney 2012. And then Superman lets people die, and when Lois is in trouble, then he rocks up and kills the terrorist leader. And then kryptonite is found in the ocean, because kryptonite's now a thing. But then it instantly goes off the rails. We now have this drawn out scene of Lois Lane talking to some terrorist leader, and Jimmy Olsen, who is a CIA agent or whatever, posing as what he was in the comics, are brought in for some interview. Then everyone gets shot. A lot of people die, and then Lois is taken hostage. And then Superman fucking liquefies the terrorist leader through many brick walls, lets all of these other people die. Like, why didn't he just take out the terrorists before they could shoot? Oh wait, it wasn't the terrorists that did it. It was undercover people. And then the result of that whole scene is Superman then being blamed for shooting people or letting people get shot. A whole bunch of nothing that no one gives a shit about. But this becomes a major running plot in this movie. But not for Superman. Lois Lane is the one who runs around trying to figure out where the mystery bullet came from. And this lady holds trials about Superman killing people with guns or something. And Superman just kind of looks around and mopes. Superman doesn't spring awake until Batman is mentioned. And it's ironic that this scene will represent the rest of how this movie is handled. All these elements happening around Superman for the other characters. And he just does nothing until Batman becomes a plot factor. That a big chunk of kryptonite is found in the ocean somewhere. And actually, after how much they tried to keep Man of Steel set in the real world, I honestly never thought kryptonite was going to end up being a part of this movie universe. But it's in there. It's in there for later so Batman can v Superman because he's just a useless mortal without it. Despite these posters. This is all just the first half an hour. It's been a flashback, a terrorist plot that goes nowhere, and the way Batman is going to beat Superman later. Only 2.5 hours to go. And the plot hasn't even started yet. Now, before I get into the story, I want to discuss 3 important characters in this movie. The 3 most important elements that could have made this movie perfect, but how they were mismanaged. Batman, Superman, and not Wonder Woman, but Lex Luthor. Batman and Superman having conflicting points of view of each other, and then have the world's smartest man trick them into fighting. Perfect, simple plot outline. So how did that fail? So in rewatching Batman vs Superman, I started to jot down notes, mostly things that stuck out as either problematic or missed opportunities. One of the biggest factors is Superman is just a plot device for everyone else to complain about. With the boring subplot of Lois Lane getting to the bottom of this bullet mystery, Holly Hunter running trials, and public relations on whether or not Superman is a threat, Batman wanting to find kryptonite to kill Superman, and Lex also wanting to kill Superman with Batman, and Doomsday, and Two-Face. Superman just mopes the whole movie. Just blank, expressionless. His introduction, he says nothing. Just murders the leader of some dodgy military, but it still ends like it's all heroic. It's kind of like a condensed version of why Man of Steel was so off-putting. Death and destruction ends on, yay, the lovers got to kiss. Oh, silly general, you can't spy on me. Look, Glasses and a suit stop me from looking like Superman, like it's the 1940s, and totally not a day and age where everyone has cameras on their phones that can zoom in. So that whole pointless scene happens so a new boring subplot can drive the movie, but not the destruction of the previous movie. Like I said before, this entire movie should have been purely a response to the events of Man of Steel. Immediately start this movie with Bruce Wayne arriving in Metropolis. We don't need to be reminded of Bruce Wayne's origins, with his parents being shot and then discovering the Batcave. Christopher Nolan nailed that in what I deem to be the best Batman movie ever made, Batman Begins. The origin will never be done better than that movie. But whatever, the visionary director needed to put in all these pretentious slow-mo shots of his parents being killed as both a reference to the Frank Miller comic book and ascending with the bats. Well, so much for fear.
That's frightened me. This time my enemies shared my dread.
But you start this movie off with that scene. Right off the bat. No pun intended. Then the aftermath that follows. It's now a reputation that Clark can't get rid of. And you know what else could be a good sequence to follow? That depressing montage of Superman saving people with Holly Hunter's voiceover of him being a potential threat. Man of Steel ended with him telling the general that he's here to help and that he should help convince Washington that he's not a threat. How about this movie's first act is the general fighting Holly Hunter over the issue of Superman, and all this happening over the montage of him saving people at the start of the film. But no, we have Lois and this dumb bullet side plot. Clark just mopes around, he doesn't do anything to clear his own name, and then at random decides he wants to expose this violent Bat character in Gotham. Like, what? Oh, that's right, the movie's called Batman vs Superman. That has to happen, right? All I wanted was for Clark to be more hands-on in terms of his own reputation. And you know what was an absolute failed opportunity? Something that could have been more compelling and made this a much more mature movie. The court scene, which was shown in all the trailers. The trial of the Superman. And not even leave it to just one scene. Have many scenes where Superman shows up to court hearings to defend himself.
Madam Secretary, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, for many years now, I've lived among you as a visitor. I've seen the beauty of your many cultures. I felt great joy in your magnificent accomplishments. As of today, I'm not a visitor anymore, because the Earth is my home too.
Like the scene where he tells the general that he's here to help.
How do we know you won't one day act against America's interests?
I grew up in Kansas, General. About as American as it gets.
Like, it's a good scene, until, like, you know, it's ruined by this shitty joke.
What are you smiling about, Captain?
Nothing, sir. I just think he's kind of hot.
Then what can follow is scenes of Lois and Clark talking in private about whether or not it's a good idea of him exposing himself to the public. But Clark believes in truth, justice, and the American way. You know, like Superman. And also at the same time, Bruce is studying these court hearings, learning more about Superman, and also Lex Luthor is doing the same. Like, there are some good scenes in Man of Steel of Superman talking to both the General and Lois, and even the final scene. Now it's just like, we've covered all of him talking, so now he can just sit there and do nothing. But until that Bat character, we're gonna find out more about him, because Clark Kent's a reporter, remember? But with the court scenes, you can have Superman doing well, earning the public trust, but then there's going to be like a final hearing, and that's when Lex sabotages it and frames Superman, and all trust is lost. To which can segue into Batman fighting Superman, which I'm going to get into a bit later. But speaking of Batman, another issue with this film. Now in my Justice League review, I had some criticisms about Ben Affleck's Batman. I brought up how this Batman's bloodthirsty nature was so off-putting and didn't feel like Batman at all. But you know, the endless flood of comments saying that this was the best Batman ever and they finally got it right. I sort of had this theory that people love Ben Affleck's Batman purely because the suit is the first ever comic book accurate suit on film. Aside from like the Adam West Batman. Now this is a sense where Batman is so iconic that the suit does all the talking for him. And when it ticks the comic book box, especially one of the most popular versions such as the Frank Miller version, I guess that can give you starry eyes and maybe forgive other things. But here's what I don't get. Aside from the comic book accurate suit, I still don't get how anything else about this Batman makes him the best Batman ever. As Bruce Wayne, he's essentially like a really tired James Bond. Like a 007 that likes to put his feet up on the weekends. And as Batman, like fun fight choreography? But I'm going to go back to the point I made in my Justice League review, that this is a completely new Batman. So he needs more of a character setup, not in terms of seeing the goddamn parents' death scene, but more understanding of this Batman. They make the point that he's been Batman for 20 years, alright? And has already had run-ins with most of his villains, but none of it is shown and none of it is felt. In fact, the second we get the first initial scene with Bruce Wayne after the events of Man of Steel, and then Alfred starts saying all of his character development.
Even you got too old to die young, and not for lack of trying. New rules.
We're criminals, Alfred. Nothing's changed.
Everything's changed.
And just like Superman, mopey, and everyone else around him does the talking for him. And just like the Lois Lane bullet subplot, Bruce has his own subplot of searching for someone called the White Portuguese, which just leads to it being a boat containing kryptonite that he'll need to fight Superman later. And Lex has it. And so he's 20 years into being Batman, and he's just super violent, kills and brands criminals just because. There is so much, well, you know Batman, so we don't need to give details. We get the drawn out parents being shot, but not a proper motivation as to why he's such a violent psycho. There's a quick shot of a Robin costume with a note written on it by Jared Leto. Now, just like the missed opportunity with the Trials of Superman, I got another one. The story of that Robin suit. But not just another bloated rush plot point for this movie, a separate Batman movie before this movie, to which that movie will be all about the death of Robin. And you know what else we haven't seen done on the big screen properly yet? Robin. Aside from the Burt Ward Robin. We get an introductory movie of this new Ben Affleck Batman. 20 years into being the Dark Knight, he would have had a Robin that long became Nightwing, and so he has a new Robin, Jason Todd. Then you can introduce a new Joker in that film, not one that was rushed and shitty and barely in Suicide Squad. That means you can have some fun in terms of which villains you have cameo in it, and have someone take the designs more seriously, instead of fucking Suicide Squad, which isn't a Batman movie. And you make it a smaller movie. The Joker kills Robin, and you can even call it like Batman Falls or something. That's what sends Batman into this dark, violent spiral. If all he had done was kill the Joker, then this kid would still be alive, so time for new rules. Plus, this Batman's depressing character can be a result of a kid dying on his watch, and not his parents who died. Straight away, a brand new angle for this brand new Batman. All that potential just shown in one random shot of a Robin suit. And that's why I think this Batman is lacking. It's 20 years into him being Batman, he's sharing this movie with Superman and Wonder Woman and Jim Carrey. So you don't understand him. It's like saying, how did Bruce Wayne get the Batcave and gadgets in the Tim Burton movie? Oh, just watch Batman Begins. It shows that. Why is this Batman so violent? Oh, because Rachel died in The Dark Knight. What happened to Robin? Oh, well, Chris O'Donnell's career went nowhere because he started in a Batman movie that dated itself before it was even released. And also, you know what this Batman movie could have ended with? Bruce Wayne in a helicopter, seeing the destruction in a distant metropolis. Just because Avengers was a massive hit the year before, doesn't mean you have to rush into Justice League as fast as possible. People would wait for the Justice League. Solo movies before the team up. Nothing wrong with that. So I'd be ready to accept a violent psycho on the edge Batman 20 years into the game, but I don't want to accept that while I'm trying to play catch up with his character development as Superman starts losing character development and sharing it all with the worst character in movie history right next to Jar Jar Binks and Will Smith's son from The Day the Earth Stood Still. My God, rewatching this movie was less than pleasant, but every time Lex comes on screen and says anything, I wanted to put my fucking head through the TV. The comparison of Lex being the Jim Carrey Riddler, it's not even a funny reference. The complexity of how true it is ridiculous.
The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
Batman? Batman, you say? Coming for you?
And I'm saying it, I figured it out. The whole reason the DCEU fell into shit in an instant and is now crippled and limping out of that dumpster fire called Justice League is not just Jesse Eisenberg's performance as Lex, but also Lex Luthor's motivation and overall importance in this movie. He's just this frustrating plot device that can just make anything happen. There's kryptonite, Lex has it. Need Doomsday, Lex made him in the ship. How do you set up the rest of the Justice League? Well, Lex has all of them on his computer, and he also made their iconic logos. For fun.
Ow, wow.
When the movie spends 2 hours not giving a proper emotional reason for Batman and Superman to actually fight, oh, just have Lex force Superman to fight Batman. They kidnapped his mommy, even though Batman was going to do it anyway. But he also has Doomsday growing in a sack. And when Doomsday kills Superman, like, what was the next plan? Oh yeah, and on top of that, you want to set up Darkseid? Well, just have Lex call his mate Stephen Wolf on the Kryptonian Skype. And what, are you going to start telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about because this is the way Lex is in the comic books? This Lex Luthor is fucking shit. He is just a wanker psycho who is just escalating everything as much as possible, like what the Joker would do. And on top of that, he acts like the Joker. Does these stupid giggles when he talks. And thanks to this Lex Luthor, we completely rush to the death of Superman and the Dark Knight Returns fight, both of which could have been incredible sequels down the track, with the right build-up. But now, right after the first Iron Man movie, just have Captain America Civil War, which also includes Ultron, and also Loki is responsible for Ultron, the Winter Soldier, and Malekith.
We have to level the playing field, Mr. Wilson. To put it plainly, shouldn't we have a league of our own?
I can help you get Batman. That is, if you'll spare my life for just a few moments.
Now, something I find even more frustrating is way before Jesse Eisenberg was cast, and it was still early days of news for this movie, I read a small plot outline that I felt sounded pretty interesting, to which I am still disappointed that this movie didn't go down that route. And what I read was, after the events of Man of Steel, with Metropolis being destroyed, Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne team up as billionaires to try and bring Metropolis back from the ashes, which just opens up so many great possibilities. One's a secret vigilante, the other one's an evil dick, but they both share the same concern of this destructive alien that leveled a city. And I got another change, a big change. But bear with me. The whole scene with Bruce Wayne arriving in Metropolis with all the destruction and his buildings being destroyed with his co-workers in it, swap him out with Lex. Give that xenophobic hatred to Lex, and it's instantly a perfectly justifiable character motivation to kill Superman. And with Bruce Wayne on Lex's side, you can have Batman sort of feeding off of Lex's hate. Or Lex hires Batman to take down Superman and Batman agrees. Then Lex can be telling Bruce about the kryptonite, so then Batman can take it later. Or you can have Lex start taking over politics, and with Superman trying to win public opinion, Lex forces Superman to work for his new corrupt government, and then starts forcing Superman to do evil shit. Like, you know, Batman doesn't agree with Superman's actions. If we're talking about homaging the comic books, imagine if Superman fighting both Batman and Lex, who both have kryptonite weapons. After a whole movie of using politics to beat Superman, and it results in a mono-a-mono fight. Previous movie, Superman fought a super being and they leveled an entire city. Now it's a smaller fight with just mortal men. Lex reveals his evil side throughout the fight, and then Batman has a change of heart. See, all of this could have been more interesting and less bloated with shit that no one cares about. I even remember back in the day, Joaquin Phoenix was rumored to play Lex, to which I was just like,
just do it!
Lex Luthor, the greatest criminal mind of our time, is now just a goofy dickhead that rushes through all of the best comic book runs in the Man of Steel sequel.
And he's coming!
I'm Batman.
This is still one of the saddest events in history. The first cinematic team-up of these two massive icons should have been unstoppable. So much of this film could have written itself if it was well set up, either with a Batman solo film beforehand, or playing to the strengths of Man of Steel. But aside from all that overly complicated, bloated, and ultimately pointless plot, what's left of the film is Zack Snyder's pretentious vision of these characters, which I don't think we needed. Like Lil Bruce ascending with the bats, the religious culture looking at Superman like he's a god, and Jesus Christ, Superman is a Jesus figure. Batman makes a primitive spear to cut him or stab him, just like Jesus. And after 2 hours of Batman wanting to kill Superman due to just xenophobia alone, he has to force himself to hate him when he has Superman weakened, just because before he was too busy smiling. He has to talk about what it means to be a man, and his parents told him he was special.
I bet your parents taught you that you mean something. That you're here for a reason. My parents taught me a different lesson. Dying in the gutter for no reason at all. They taught me the world only makes sense if you force it to.
It's like, since you have these massive icons to play with, you have to add godly metaphors to them, because that's how culture sees them. But what you're meant to be doing is trying to make them as compelling characters as possible. So more this.
He has the power to wipe out the entire human race, and if we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty. And we have to destroy him.
But he is not our enemy.
Unless this.
We create a free and a...
Every time I think of Zack Snyder coming up with these ideas, I just imagine this. And then the plot takes a break to have Superman travel to some snowy mountain somewhere where he finds ghostly Papa Kent to learn some stupid life lesson, and it's revealed that Pa Kent is the Blair Witch.
Woke up this morning, just like 2 seconds ago, and there are piles of rocks outside of our tent.
Something in it.
Also, the nightmare sequence. This fucking scene comes out of nowhere, and it's also dumb because it shows the actual events that are to come, for no reason at all. What a spot-on dream. And then the Flash rocks up in a flash, and then freaks out because his cameo was too soon. So much sequel setups at once. Jesus Christ, what balls you have to shove so much comic book shit into a movie that should purely just focus on Batman fighting Superman. Also, the Flash says, "You were right about Superman, you were always right." To which at the time, Batman hates Superman, and just had a nightmare about Superman taking over the world. So what was saying the word Martha make Bruce like Superman? If he was right to think that Superman was a threat this whole time, because the Flash said so, then Bruce would never ever have snapped out of that hatred and just kept trying to kill Superman. And also, people say this is the best superhero movie ever made. This is the best superhero movie ever made because it has so many images from so many comic books shoved into it. But this movie is possibly one of the worst movies ever written, like having nothing but potential and blowing your wad too fast, too much. The live action crossover of both Batman and Superman, as well as fans of both characters, deserved much, much better. Now Superman has quit, absolutely no news on Batman's interest, the Flash can't lock in a director, Cyborg can't get off the ground, and all we have is Aquaman and Wonder Woman to bring something out of this mess.
Once we had Batman in the movie, we knew, I kind of pretty much knew if the universe could support a Superman and Batman, then it could support the rest of the Justice League.